This is day 9 of the June 95 10-day retreat in Springwater. There are a couple of little questions that would be nice to clear up. Sometimes what is thought to be little in the beginning may not be so. Maybe we'll spend a whole hour with one. Yesterday, in a group meeting, one person said something like this: every talk or meeting always seems to come back to this one fundamental question: who is the listener? Who am I? Who wants? And I don't remember all the examples that were given. And I want to clarify something in the language here, realizing the tremendous power that language has on our way of thinking and therefore responding. Maybe many years ago I used the word who, because that is a traditional inquiry, has been for thousands of years, formulated. I don't know how in the mostly Eastern languages, but translated into English as who am I? Or who's the doer, who is the meditator? But I have for quite a while now abstained from using this word who, because the brain that so quickly and automatically wants to give an answer and gives an answer imagines the who to be a person, an entity, an individual, some kind of a who, me, him, this person or that thing, something entity-like. And to avoid that pitfall, I'm not using that word, but using the word what am I? When it comes sometimes at the end of a talk or in the opening talk. What am I without all ideas about myself, all conceptualization? What am I beside the memory of what I am? So there is a subtle difference which I would like to point out. Particularly if one finds that inquiry meaningful, compelling. Now, if whoever is here finds compelling to ask, who am I? There be no interference with it from my part. But I'm not putting it that way, for the reasons just described. Not to have this lurking idea in the background that there must be some entity to come up with. It's so hard for us to imagine or conceptualize or understand intellectually that there could be just listening, just simple awareness, with no one doing it. No super entity behind this minor entity here, doing the listening for me. So the fact is that there is just awareness, just listening. But the attachment to myself as this person I imagine and like or hate and know its history constantly creates this individuality, me, with a past and with a future and wanting to survive forever. And that's why the question comes up as imagery and identifications are illuminated, become transparent in the mind. Being so identified with one's clothes or one's profession, one's religious affiliation or whatever it all is, one's tastes or hobbies. Is that all I am? What I'm identifying with, or what the brain is identifying as me? Or is there something much deeper than our conventional identities, which always spring up anew, even seeing through all identity for a moment? Very soon the identity of the one who has seen, and attachment to that picture of myself. And what sees all that? What perceives all that going on? Right now, and listening, the birds singing. Breathing coming haltingly or heavily. Heart beating. Warm, it's warm in here, so the removing of the jacket. It's all there, isn't it? No effort has to be made to hear the birds. They're there. At the moment of awareness, they're there. And language then says, well, I am aware of the birds, but that is extra. That is complicating matters considerably. The German word for awareness just comes to mind right now, which is a beautiful word. Maybe the word where in awareness also has a common root with the German Gewahrsein, wahr and where, quite possibly having the same root. Wahr means true. Gewahrsein means being true. What more can one say? Chit and breathing. The openness of allowing thoughts to be seen, felt, the emotions they trigger, without immediately identifying this is me, poor me or fabulous me. Then something that is flowing freely, creatively, openly becomes solidified, crystallized into some kind of a me structure. Something else that was brought up last night, again, the question has to formulate itself freshly. I do not recall verbatim things from meetings. Isn't there in communities, spiritual communities we were referring to at that time, whether religiously affiliated or Springwater, which isn't there a vocabulary evolving and being maintained, and people who come here parroting these words which are being used? Parroting implying using words which are commonly used. imitating them, as it were, mechanically. And there are further implications in it. Why does one repeat words? Would one repeat words mechanically? Could there be a motive of, we didn't go into that at that meeting, a moment of self-aggrandizement, wanting to appear as knowing or understanding? This is all implied in this parroting of words used in a community. And we talk about this because it does come up. It wasn't the first time it came up last night. It does come up in our group meetings Sunday mornings, or often when people who don't come here very frequently join us, or who have come frequently, bring up this question for all of us to look at, to question into ourselves. Is this indeed what one is doing? Parroting without understanding, or using words to feed, nourish the self-identity as this or that, knowledgeable or clear, whatever the picture is one may wish to have of oneself, and using that to aggrandize that or reinforce it. Is that going on? And it's for each one of us to look, because it may not be correct or accurate what someone perceives in someone else. We so quickly interpret one another on the basis of lots of psychological stuff in ourselves. Maybe feelings of inferiority, comparisons, wanting to be as good as, or always the potential of envy of others who are better, or seen or thought to be better than I am, and interpretation operating in the dynamics of these motives and feelings of lack or mechanisms. So, how can we tell ourselves whether we're just parroting without understanding, using words without the depth of meaning, and whether someone else is doing so? It's important, very important, because it is a fact, an unavoidable thing, that people who live together, work together, do retreats together, investigate together, and have someone who gives talks, reading similar books, that a vocabulary evolves. There are not infinite words to express. So we do share this, there's no question about it. Share a vocabulary, although I've noticed in myself as time goes on and different experiences are made, different books are read, different discoveries are made, that my vocabulary does change somewhat. It has changed over the years somewhat. Sometimes when I read an old article or chapter in a book, I feel I'm not putting it that way anymore, just like with this who this morning. Incidentally, I may use who and inadvertently. Now, I'm not saying I know absolutely for sure I haven't used it. How could anybody ever be absolutely sure of anything? So, it's very difficult if there is, particularly if there is the clarity of intellectual understanding, very difficult to realize that there isn't direct insight when everything seems so clear in the explanation that one can give. No one need or can be faulted for that. Because unless there is the directness of insight, what can one, on what basis can one tell that it's just intellectual understanding? It needs some direct seeing, which can happen very unspectacularly, without much fanfare. And then suddenly it's clear, yeah, this is how it is. Before I was just thinking about it clearly. But this is something entirely different. The directness of perception or insight. One person says that the birds sound like a bell, so clear. The colors are so bright. Never seen them like this before. That's not the intellectual description of color, although the intellect is trying to give expression to what it is that is being seen directly. Or seeing psychological stuff in oneself. It doesn't matter what it is that is seen, but the clarity with which it is seen. The immediacy. Then it is not just the words about it, but yeah, this is what's going on, or what was going on last night. One person reporting, noticing at night how not just the fantasies, joyful or pleasurable as well as painful or angry, fearful fantasies going on, not just seeing that was happening, but that there was some delight in it, some holding on to it. Not wanting to be attentive, wanting to move with the power and momentum of whatever these fantasies do to the whole organism. To see that directly is different from talking about it abstractly because one has read about it or heard about it or thinks that is the way it is. So can one discern for oneself clearly the difference between just thinking about something and awareness of the thinking about something? The transparency of thought, this moment going on, and the emotions and sensations it triggers throughout the organism. Not just because somebody has said this time and time again during a retreat and on tapes and in books, but yeah, it is so, it's evident right here. I wonder whether without this directness of understanding what goes on in oneself, one can really see what goes on in someone else. Whether indeed the person is parroting or speaking out of seeing. And in case of doubt, we can always ask each other. And I don't mean any need for attacking each other over it. It's what we've often learned, to question someone in a sort of attacking or aggressive mode. That something is not necessary. Because one understands how defensive oneself becomes if one feels attacked. And then we can't listen and look clearly, relaxedly at what's going on. So, can we question each other when there is a suspicion or the doubt whether a person is just rattling off remembered words, or whether, even though remembered words are necessary to express something, but whether something is being looked at and the attempt to express it in words, what it is that is being looked at. Wondered about, experienced, maybe not now but yesterday, but it's still very clear in the memory. So one wants to talk about it, put it into words. And the words that come are the prevalent words right now at this time and place. Although it's always amazing to me how people also come up with new words, and it's a delight to me to hear new words. So can we question each other gently as one common inquiry? What is it that you're trying to say? What do you mean by this? Say some more. I don't quite understand. Or is that just purely abstract for you? Is it theoretical? Not as an attack, but as an inquiry, so that something can become illumined this moment. Because it doesn't mean that insight has to take place in the future or only took place in the past. It's operating right now. It's always now that it's operating. So often we say, we sort of falter in our expression. We want to say something and we falter and we say, well, the right words just don't come to me right now. Or else we will say, do you see what I mean? Hoping the other person will sort of magically understand what I don't understand completely myself. I may be wrong, but I have found over the years that if the right words don't come, there very often also isn't a right looking yet. It isn't quite clear. It's not just the fault of the words or the brain that refuses to release them, but a lack of clarity. And to see that and admit it to oneself or to each other is a beautiful thing, because that's a sign of not the solid identification needing to appear in such and such a special way. There's no need for that. It don't have to appear as anything, and things are unclear or confusing most of the time. Maybe out of such realization that there is confusion right now, a lack of clarity, and no need to appear clear where it's not there, the constraints drop, the constraint to have a facade, and therefore things become clearer again. It's amazing how it works, how imagery boxes in this whole process of looking and expressing freely, without identification. It can also happen that if oneself does not understand what these folks here are talking about, feeling sort of like an outsider, not yet having that vocabulary, just having arrived, is there our ancient feeling of inferiority, rearing its head, rearing its sensations and thoughts. and to feel, not to feel inferior, but to feel equal or superior, attacking, as it were, the insiders as an outsider. This can happen. It happens the world over. And it is so beautiful that it can be watched here in our small, temporary communities with insight into how small communities operate, even just a community of two. Interest in it and insight into it, plunging it or plumbing it. There grows more understanding for what is going on in the so-called outside world. Antagonisms between insiders and outsiders, ethnic groups, religious groups, political parties. Cohesion of the inside party line. And the need to attack it as an outsider because one isn't part of that. One would like to be part of it. Or one wants to defend one's own group. And strangely enough, our most common defense seems attack of others. So, there is nothing in our living together as well as alone which is not worthwhile, eminently worthwhile, looking into with an unprejudiced mind, not prejudging it. I know how it is. But not knowing how it is, and therefore a freshness of energy to discover ourselves in each other. Actually, in this connection, it just comes to mind, somebody brought up yesterday too, wondering about arrogance. This person was looking into herself, wondering whether in needing to know something, particularly in a group setting, where we sort of incite each other, from habit, from long habit, to know something, whether in this knowing and needing to know there's arrogance. Arrogance being really the reaction to feeling insufficient or inferior, needing to feel superior. I don't think we would have that need if there wasn't basically programmed into us feelings of insufficiency and inferiority, dating way back to our beginning days. So that's something very neat to explore, this need to know, and if one knows or puts something out, an arrogant identity. At least questioning it, whether this is what is taking place. The person who brought it up something must have been noticed and questioned. Although we did discuss it quite freely, that sometimes ex post facto, after the fact, thought can say, oh my, you were arrogant in that meeting because you were spouting. And maybe at the moment it wasn't so. Something came out quite spontaneously. out of the total context, needing to say something, and then also due to past conditioning afterwards thinking, why on earth did I say that? Made a fool of myself, or exposed myself as being this way or that way. People tell me this all the time, that is a byproduct of coming to groups. After participating, remorse over it, regrets of what one said. And very often, when the person mentions to me how foolish that was, or how unnecessary a remark, I haven't felt it to be that way. I felt it was part of the life of this discussion. Which doesn't mean that one can't question oneself. But one can also question these habitual judgments about ourselves. Often an irrepressible need to put oneself down after one has felt a brief elation, good feeling about having said something, and then the cold blanket on top. Because I shouldn't feel good. This is not in my program. We don't think it that way, but this is maybe how it is. And it can illuminate, become transparent with this kind of work, alone and together. What also happens in groups, since we're talking about it right now, is no matter what goes on, one can learn about oneself in the process. I remember one of our very first group meetings, which was sort of, we did it as a trial balloon. It was so radical in this tradition of quiet retreating to get together and talk as a group. And one of the first meetings, as far as I was concerned, really went awry. To say the least, because there was one participant who became the teacher of everyone. A person who had never been here before and hasn't been here since. And it was really quite embarrassing. Particularly seeing the people who were there. One woman, I never even thought she would come to a group, a very quiet meditator, very inward person. And thoughts went like this, oh my God, what does she think of this whole enterprise? And does she now feel that her quietness has been exploded or ruined, spoiled? Such thoughts went on. And sure enough, the next opportunity for a private meeting, she came in. I was sort of bracing myself somewhat. What I would say if she said what I thought she could say. And as it is with most anticipations, they're false. So to my utter surprise, she said, you know, I was really upset at myself for being so judgmental of this person that I didn't really hear what he was saying. So rejecting of what was going on. That I wasn't listening at all, not to anybody, just hardened against it, closed up. What a wonderful thing to see in action. That was her response. I breathed a sigh of release. We still have group meetings. and not for everyone, and don't have to be. Sometimes I wonder whether it disturbs people when some really loud laughter erupts, but I have never heard a complaint about it. And usually, eventually, over the years, we do hear complaints of things that people would like to see changed or absent. Sometimes people say, it's so wonderful to hear somebody laughing. Laughing birds. I was going to talk a little bit about our fear of dying, fear of ending, what this is all about. And humanity's reaction to fear of dying, fear of ending. Imagining where one will go after death. The happy places, the blissful places, the horrendous places, the happy hunting grounds. The old Germans had a myth. I wonder it was only the myth circulated among the male warriors of course, dying in the battlefield, and then after death, the Valkyries, women on horses, gathering up these fallen heroes on their horses and bringing them back to Valhalla, the place of the gods, where they would drink ambrosia, or whatever it was. No, what was it? An intoxicating drink for the rest of their lives, or I don't know whether they would even be revived. So this kind of myth-making to abate, to allay the fear of dying, of ending. Of course, the whole thing of rebirth, being reborn, reincarnated in better reincarnations, and the fear of being reborn in lesser lives, less desirable ones. And therefore maybe the threat making one, or attempting to make one behave here, now, to avoid the horrendous afterlife, next life. All this imagination going on, in thought, in idea, in concept, in theory, in belief. You could say, wait a minute, maybe it's really going on. Paradise does exist, or a future life will be the present life. Well, we can look now at this present life. What it is that we're identified with, and we've done this for 10 days. A thought entity, an image, a story. Past chapters, and hopefully many future chapters into eternity. Of what? Of more memory, more thought, more ideas? Or are we concerned with directly living now, this moment, not in the future, based on the past? Not living in the future based on present anxieties, but plumbing these present anxieties right down to their root. Where do they come from? What's their origin? Is that all we are? This clinging to an identity and hoping it will survive. Not just clinging to the body as clinging to that, but also again an idea. Not the functioning of the body as it will, biologically, circumstantially, age, die, but the idea of keeping it alive. But I think more than the attachment to the body, there's attachment to the story and picture of ourselves. And this tremendous yearning to think of it as lasting forever. Or the fear of the thought that it may not, that it may come to an end. Or that those whom we identified with, whom we love, would come to an end. In one meeting, the soul was mentioned. Is there a soul, an immortal soul in each human being that will survive the body, reincarnate, or go to heaven? Let's find out. Let's find out what's in here. Because this is how the belief goes. There's something inside me. Let's investigate the insides of me. It's fun to listen quietly to what's inside. Without prejudice, not judging ahead of time, not knowing it's the soul that's there and I'm going to prove it, then we'll find it for sure in the imagination. But starting from not knowing, putting imagination aside, understanding full well its power, and listening inwardly. And maybe for the longest time or the shortest time, what one will come upon is Niagaras of thoughts and ideas and feelings and emotions and sensations, as we've been doing for the past 10 days. And then, every once in a while, wonder of wonders, the abating of thought, the quieting down of the stream. My mind is now quite quiet, one person said. That was the expression of it. So, the more we look, more patiently there is inward listening, not pressured, not wanting to come up with evidence or results. Just quietly listening. The less there is of an inside. That division melts between my inside and what's in there. Thoughts are seen, they are transparent. But what is the dividing line right now between breathing and birdsong, listening openly? Thoughts? Is that what is inside the brain? Sensations in the body? Yes, that's there. But a moment of awareness, Gewahrsein, being true right now, seems to short-circuit all this other stuff. For a moment, how long, who cares? And what reveals itself is not a world of continuing entities, selves, souls, but a quiet, spacious wholeness, free of this burden of individuality with its fears and desires, pleasures and pains. At this moment, asking oneself, is there fear of ending? Ending of what? Is there desire to continue? Continuing what? Thought bundles? Who wants to continue thought bundles? But they have continued. Thoughts continue as a steady stream from generation to generation for thousands of years. New thoughts are added to the stream. But some old thoughts still persist. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Being reborn in new organisms, newly inculcated, or who knows whether it's already genetically there, some of these ideas. So the last question that going to come up here was somebody asking early on in the retreat, is there such a place of love and compassion? Is there such a place? Because this is what I feel makes this work meaningful, to come upon that place. Because I don't want to live in perpetual self-centeredness. First of all, this seemingly perpetual self-centeredness needs to become very clear and transparent from moment to moment, without identifying with it. That this is how the vast life energy has become focalized or crystallized in self-centered thinking and emoting and acting or reacting. People report this, one can observe it. A moment of openness, and the instant a thought about my future or my anger, my gripes about something takes hold, the whole openness collapses into a tight spot, a knot. And the energy circulates in anger or fear and throwing out streams of thoughts about what they are, what I am, what will happen to me. Likewise, at a moment of opening to this whole, spacious, silent being, unfocused, uncentered in myself, those thoughts are quiet, in abeyance or short-circuited, whatever the mechanisms are that must truly be there, physically also. Not knotted up in meanness, but open. The entire universe listening, one person said that, and watching the bird and the chipmunk and the flower, the whole universe was listening and watching. At that moment, the release of energy from this knot of self-involvement manifests itself very naturally and spontaneously in compassion, understanding of each other, without malice or revenge, but in a lovingness, moving toward each other. No, not moving toward each other. There's no space between. Embracing the whole as it is, and as it is well. will end here for today.